My buddy Ric Bucher. We got to go to dinner again. We used to go to dinner until this virus. Fox Sports NBA analyst covering the NBA since the early 90s. All right, the MJ documentary. Is it a tell-all or not, Rick?
No, it's not a tell-all. I was excited about the prospect that it was going to be when we got the little tidbit in the first episode about the partying Bulls and Jordan walking into the room and lines and guys smoking and the women and all that. But it's not a Jordan documentary. It's a Last Dance documentary. We've had 4 episodes. One's been about Dennis Rodman. Another's been about Scottie Pippen. And it's certainly not a tell-all. We don't have, at least to this point. Now, I will say that I can and may be corrected on this, but we haven't had anything on the Steve Kerr punch. We've had no mention of a guy named Dennis Hopson, who Jordan basically ran out of Chicago because he couldn't stand the heat. No mention of the treatment of Tony Kukoc. No mention of his first wife, Juanita. No mention of gambling. It is, and look, I appreciate it. Last weekend was as close to a real sports weekend as we've had in weeks between the draft and this. But I was expecting to see everything about Jordan because I appreciated everything about Jordan. I covered him. I knew all his warts. I knew the good and the bad. I still think he's the greatest player ever. I still admire what he accomplished. Doesn't change anything for me. The human part of him actually elevates what he did on the court. And we're seeing a bit of an antiseptic, skewed version of who Michael Jordan was. When he said, people are going to think I'm a terrible person, I was like, oh, wow, they're really going to pull the covers on this. Cool. I don't know about you, but to this point, if you're just watching this and creating your image of Jordan based on this, I don't know that you come away from this thinking he's a terrible person.
Yeah, the director I talked to, he said part 7 was his favorite. Maybe that delves into it. How bad was the Kukoc stuff with Jordan? How poorly did he treat him?
Well, between him and Pippen, they made life miserable for him on a daily basis, in part because he was making more than Pippen was, and he was Jerry Krause's guy coming in, and there was nothing that Kukoc did to warrant the way they dealt with him. But going from when they played overseas, when they played him over there, they tried to humiliate him. It went a little bit far. Like, they made all these allowances for Rodman, but they were making no allowances for Kukoc in terms of being Krause's guy or playing a certain style. At least delve into that and explain why there was a difference in how those two were handled. We haven't seen any of that. And I can tell you that Tony Kukoc to this day is still a bit bitter about the way he was treated in spite of all the success that they had.
Yeah. Do you think Michael would just not want to talk about the Steve Kerr punch? Would Steve talk about it?
Oh, yeah. Steve actually talked to me about it the other day. And he was funny about it. He said there's no question that it was a test, that Jordan tested everyone. And it was basically, he tested you because he wanted to know that he could trust you. He would test you in practice. He would test you every day because he wanted to see if you would crack under his relentless demands and saying, this is the way it has to be. This is your lane. Can you stay in it? Are you going to bite back when things get a little tough? And now I do believe when it came to the Kerr punch that Jordan lost it just a little bit because he did apologize to Steve afterward.
Yes.
And I think that went a little too far. But the back and forth and the demands, keep in mind, this is right after Jordan came back. And it was in training camp for the 95-96 season. And he had something to prove because they'd just gotten knocked out by Orlando. Steve said that training camp was a war every single day. And And it was because Jordan was going to make sure, hey, we're not going home early again. And Steve said, when the punch happened, he said, I was about to say, they had to separate us. He said, but it was more like they had to drag him off of me. So Steve has a view of it. I mean, he's comfortable with it now. I wish we'd hear that side of it. I wish we'd hear Jordan's side of it. He has talked about it here and there, but I think it should be part of this doc.
And the gambling stuff, how much is there?
100%. Yeah, I mean, that was he didn't in the 93 finals. He did not speak to the media for the first, I think it was like 3 days, because there was a book that came out by a guy named Richard Esquinas about how he'd won $1 million from Jordan on the golf course. And there were a lot of questions surrounding that. There's questions that and I think it's I think it's a myth that he was the reason that he stepped away from the game and went and played baseball was because David Stern made him, because the gambling issue had become too great. I don't believe that's true. I believe it was the grief over losing his father. There's the rumors that his father was somehow connected. The loss of his father was connected to Michael's gambling. I don't believe any of that, but I think if you're doing a Jordan documentary, if you're doing a Jordan tell-all, I don't see how you don't, aside from showing glimpses of them playing cards or rolling dice on the bus or the plane. I think you have to go a little bit deeper into that because it was part of Michael's story.
What do you make of Isaiah backtracking? Essentially getting caught in a lie, very disingenuous to say, nobody shook hands back then. Everybody did. What do you make of what do you make of that?
I hate it. Look, they were the bad boys. You didn't shake hands. You were staying on brand. It's who you were. One, don't apologize for it and say, hey, that's who we are. That's how we operated. Or say, you know what? I wish we'd done it different. That was a mistake on our part. What I'm hearing from Isaiah is the reason we did it is because these guys didn't shake our hands. And the reason we did it is because of what the Bulls said, before the series was over. I'm like, no, whatever it is, you think Michael Jordan wanted to shake your hand after you knocked him out for the previous 3 times? Hell no. It's what you decide to do. It's what your actions are. Don't do something and then tell me, well, we did it because of these guys over here. No, it was your decision to do what you did, and either stand by it or say I was wrong. It was a mistake. We should have done it different. Don't try to rationalize why it was okay for you to do it because somebody else did it. That to me is of all the things that Isaiah could say, that is the worst explanation.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, we got a minute left, 90 seconds. NBA came out, said May 1st. Atlanta Hawks GM pushed back. Now it's May 8th. What's the update? Is there optimism out there at all?
For sure there is. And that's why they're taking these steps, because they're trying to find the path to making this happen. Now, the 2 things that are out of their control are how quickly, what's the availability of the testing going to be, and how do you deal with getting teams ready when you have different protocol in different parts of the country. I think ideally what they'd like to do is have everybody be able to start to work out in their facilities and then say, okay, this is when we're convening everybody in a central location. The way it's going now, it's almost like we got to bring everybody to the central location. We got to test everybody and then get to business. And that becomes far more difficult to navigate. So I do think that this is a sign that the NBA is trying to do everything that it can to still make the possibility of playing again a reality. But there's just elements beyond their control that are ultimately going to dictate whether they can do that or not.
All right. I'll maybe bring you back before the end of the week again. I got so many questions I want to ask you, but we're out of time. Ric Bucher, good talking to you, bud.
You got it, Colin.
Yeah, listen, it's the May 1st or May 8th, whenever it is. What they're telling you is, guys, get in shape. June 1st, we want to start playing again. That's what they're telling you. Let's do some individual workouts for a week or two. Then we'll do some collective workouts at the end of May, early June. And they're telling you they want to start the season really early June, which is good. But good by me. I can only talk about Jordan's dock so long.